Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Silicon Valley Innovation Center interview. Very glad to have you with us. My name is Rahim Rahimtullah. I am your host today. And today we're talking about how artificial intelligence is transforming the banking and finance industry. And helping us do that today is my guest in conversation. It is Ed Fernandez, who is a board director and advisor. Ed, thank you so much for being with us. Great to have you. Great to have you with us today. I wanted to start, if I could, by putting to you this famous phrase that we probably all know of, and I'm sure you know of pretty well now as well, which is software is eating the world, but AI will eat software. And so I wonder if we could start here. Just tell us maybe a little bit, unpack that for us. What does it mean that AI is going to eat software? And when we look at banking and finance, do we see that happening?
Okay, so first of all, thank you for having me, and appreciate the opportunity to speak. So yeah, you are right, absolutely right. There is a new mantra in Silicon Valley, it's AI is eating software, and this seems to be a little bit, first of all, cryptic statement, but it's absolutely true. What is happening under the hood is that we now have new tools and new technologies that allow us to apply machine learning and effectively build software in a completely different way in comparison to what we have been doing for decades in the software industry. So first things first, the economy has been developing and driven by software-driven companies, and you have the usual suspects here, like Google, Microsoft, Facebook. Even Apple is actually a software company on top of the hardware that they are selling. And the economy has been growing and driven by these companies, software-driven companies. Now, what is changing is that there is a new way of making software, which is data-driven. And this is about using historical data, applying machine learning algorithms, and eventually come up with the rules and the patterns, which is the new way of making this software. So it's no longer about providing explicit rules to the computers. It's about inferring those rules by applying machine learning algorithms to the existing data. And this has proven to be extremely efficient for certain cases, and a new industry is developing upon that. Machine learning in particular, beyond AI, because we probably need to differentiate both terms. Machine learning in particular has come to a maturity level that now is becoming a ubiquitous technology and is being adopted very rapidly. AI is a different thing because it's about providing let's say, human-level intelligence to machines. We are not there, by the way. There is a ton of hype, but it's only hype. But machine learning in particular, the machine learning methods and techniques are really mature. And this is the reason why we see now companies like NVIDIA coining this AI is going to be software mantra here in the Valley.
And so that's right. And so if we're talking about machine learning in particular, how far do you see that now in banking and finance? Is that something that's being taken up at a wide scale?
Yeah, absolutely. It's catching fire effectively. And by the way, in fintech, in the financial sector in particular, this is one of the first adopters of traditional machine learning. So there are many examples of that. Back in the 80s, companies like FICO, for instance, in this country, in the US, were pioneers of using machine learning, for instance, for risk scoring. So we have the FICO score and other risk scoring mechanisms which are based on machine learning. And those are custom-built models which were developed back in the 80s. So
that's as much as, sorry to interrupt you, as much as 30 years ago, this was already happening.
So the traditional machine learning, so first here, there are like two major categories of techniques when we speak about machine learning. The traditional machine learning is about algorithms and techniques that are as old as 50 years old in terms of when they were invented. Now we have deep learning, which is the second major category, which is relatively new, is maybe 10 to 15 years old in terms of the original inventions and the research. And that's what is also driving the trajectory of the industry. Now, with respect to fintech and financial adoption, The traditional machine learning has been like the bread and butter for the industry, and this is what is really being adopted widely. A simple regression model or the traditional robust industrial machine learning models that we know very well are well explainable, they can be tracked, they can be scaled, and those are very rapidly being used in many use cases. I'll provide more examples later on. Now, deep learning is this other second category of machine learning algorithms that are completely different. They are based on neural networks, and this is a different story. We are seeing in practice that deep learning is also becoming gradually adopted in the fintech industry, in the banking industry, but there is a serious caveat there, and is because of the nature of neural networks, which is a more opaque method in order to apply machine learning, meaning effectively that there is a black box effect there, and the explainability of the predictions from the models are not still there in order to provide compliance. That is limiting that adoption. So, to recap here, two main areas of machine learning techniques. One is deep learning, neural networks. The other one is traditional machine learning methods. The traditional machine learning is really becoming widely adopted in banking institutions, in fintech companies, and I cannot think of any new fintech player in the space that is not using this technology from now onwards. Deep learning is a different thing. Majority of the big corporations are experimenting with it, but they are still in a phase in which they cannot move to production because they are facing compliance issues.
So what are these compliance issues? This is about the fact that information goes in, answers come out, but we can't necessarily explain how we got to those answers. I mean, this could cause problems, could it, for example, in a mortgage application, which gets rejected, but we don't know why, because it's a black box and it just comes out and says no, and there's no explainability there?
That's exactly right. So what is happening is that you can train a neural network-based machine learning model, and it will be extremely efficient, extremely accurate, so it will work extremely well. But we don't know very well why the neural network is coming up with that decision. It could be a rejection over a mortgage, it could be a risk score over a customer, and that's the reason why the regulations, the companies, the banking institutions cannot comply with the regulators. This is particularly true in the case of Europe because of GDPR and all the data privacy laws that are in place right now. So, in other words, you may have a neural network-based trained model, and again, it could be extremely accurate, extremely effective, calculating the risk score for a customer, but you may be, you are obliged to provide an explanation on why a decision is made by the algorithm. And this is not something that we can easily provide today. It's actually becoming possible, but still is not still compliance. And that's the reason why banking institutions are very careful in what techniques they use in order to effectively put into production. Put into production means make it commercial.
Sure.
Solutions based on deep learning in particular.
So it sounds like, in a way, there's a sort of a problem here for banks and financial institutions in a sense that, I mean, if they want to go very far with using these neural networks and deep learning, there's sort of a natural barrier, if you will, a natural ceiling where they can get to at the moment until perhaps we, as a society, sort out exactly how we feel about how much data we want to release, you know, how we feel about having decisions made by these algorithms or by artificial intelligence, I should say. So, I mean, what's the best way to proceed now if you're a bank or financial institution? Is it simply to wait until the regulations catch up to the technology, or is it more complex than that?
Well, my take on this one, I'm expecting the regulation to become even worse in the sense that there will be more requirements for compliance. In other words, the trend here is that we consumers and the people in general will have more rights on our data, more ownership on our data, if you will. So data privacy laws are going to become more strict and more complex, and compliance will be more difficult in the future. So the consequence of that is that banking entities will need to be more proficient in terms of having the ability to provide those explanations. And to be precise here, GDPR in Europe actually empowers the end user, the consumers, the people, to ask for an explanation of why the banking entity has taken a decision if there is an algorithm involved in the process. That's what the law says. So this is already in place in Europe, and you as a consumer, whenever you are rejected or you are not given certain economic conditions, you have the right to go to your bank and ask for that particular explanation. And with that comes all the compliance process for banks in front of the regulators to provide those explanations. So this is going to be a growing demand in the future, driven by customers, end users, and regulators. Now, at the same time, what has been happening also since I've been monitoring this particular part of the market, which is called explainable AI, I've been looking into this initiative since 2015. What I have seen, and be more concrete here, is there have been investments and specific initiatives to provide that explainability. DARPA has been aggressively investing in this space, and there are in US only 13 teams I know of, research teams, that have been working with DARPA in order to evolve the machine learning models to be more explainable, both from the architectural point of view and the actual interfacing point of view. Because one thing is to be able to analyze what the models are doing, what the neural network is doing, and the other thing is to be able to provide a human-level explanation of it. So both things have been happening, and there are certain advances and some startups that are explicitly providing explainability. What I'm trying to say here is that the industry has very quickly identified the problem. They have been working on that, and we are expecting industry-level solutions in the market really very soon. I can pinpoint already 3 or 4 startups here in the States that are already working with banks to provide that level of explainability. So all in all, there is a trade-off here, and you are very right. Your comment is very spot on in the sense that this is one of the barriers for further adoption of deep learning in the banking industry. But my expectation is that this barrier is going to become, because of the context there and the driving forces, this barrier is going to be removed very quickly as well. More and more, we will see more models that are explainable and more ways of providing that explainability to the customers.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's definitely a question, I think, as we see more and more adoption of artificial intelligence as to, how it works with us on a human level, how we interact with it and how we feel about it. And just to rewind a little bit, let's talk a little bit about the other type of machine learning, the perhaps more simple version, if you will, the one that you said is now very widespread, everyone's using, which I suppose is more about just crunching a lot of data and looking for patterns in big data sets and drawing out some insights. And as what I see with that sort of technology in banking and finance and in generally in industries is that it can be used internally within a company to help the business processes, to help things run more efficiently, to understand better the customer needs. And then it can also be used to serve customers themselves. So customers will have a better experience because instead of having to always go through human agents or pick up phones and call customer service centers, they can use AI through their mobile phones, online, and so on. So just talk us through, if you can, a little bit about how you see that more simple, if you will, version of machine learning being used today in banks.
Okay, yeah, that's a good approach. Probably speaking about concrete use cases will be helpful in order to make this high-level statement more tangible. So what we are seeing, and we are engaged in different projects with banking entities all over the world, is that they have typically, literally, hundreds of use cases for internal use. And those could be simple things. And to your point about using traditional machine learning, the more industrial or easy methods beyond deep learning, what we see is that they have all these new marketing approaches. Like, for instance, building product recommenders. Believe it or not, for banks, they have literally some of them, they have thousands of services. More or even dozens of thousands of services for customers. All kinds of, it could be the way you handle your credit cards, the different services around credit, debt, mortgages, insurance. They have all these thousands of different use cases. What they have identified already is that any digital process, any internal digital process that was associated with those services is a candidate for machine learning. In other words, if they have historical data about those services, their use, this is a candidate for a simple machine learning model to optimize that process and make it better. Concrete examples. Product recommenders. This started back in 2014, 2015. They started experimenting with what is the best service or product proposition I can do to a specific customer or to a specific cluster of customers. So two things happened. The banks started to work on clustering better their customers. In other words, making new groups of customers with certain affinity based on applying machine learning. There are what is called clustering techniques using machine learning models that will allow you to classify your customers in different ways. So that's one. And the other one is
is that and if I just fresh on, so is that the machine learning algorithm there classifying the customers automatically, looking at the data about, I don't know, income or where they live or how they use banking services and taking that and then putting it into clusters for you?
So absolutely. And there are even the technical names for it, like K-means algorithm and other clustering algorithms that we use in order to achieve that purpose. But that's exactly right, exactly what you said. Instead of using the traditional human knowledge or human expertise in order to cluster your customers, you throw a bunch of historical data to a machine learning model, and you let the machine cluster the customers for you. And this is amazing. The machine will have a completely different view compared to the human traditional biased decisions in terms of selecting those customers. So
and it also recommends the products as well, because like you said, there's thousands potentially of products, and again, that's for a human to do that matching.
That's the second step. The first step is to cluster your customers based on historical data. So the machine learning model, the machine learning algorithm will look into historical data and find patterns that no human can find. And based on those patterns, we'll cluster your customers in a different way. Let's say it allows you to target your customers in a different way. Now, the second stage is to say, okay, what would be the best offering for those customers that I have clustered? And then that's an area we call recommender systems. You can think Amazon, for instance, when we browse and we have these recommendations at the bottom of the page. A similar thing, but for banks. And what is happening is the banks are building very, very, very accurate and strong recommender systems that will tailor the specific service proposition to those customers. That has been happening since 2014, 2015, as long as they have been more capable of structuring their data so that the machine learning models were able to provide better recommendations, better product offerings for those customers. And you can feel that also if you go to your bank and you are connected to their apps, that they are becoming better and better in understanding what is it what we need, as long as they have more information about us and they cluster, they profile us better. So that's a trend there. And now every major global corporation in the banking sector has that or is working with that. Is working with recommenders, is working with clustering techniques. And this is just one of the samples of how machine learning is helping them become better. Let me give you another example, because I love this one as well. There is the traditional global banking entities. That's the majority of the market capitalization in the sector. But there is a breed of new players coming in. There are companies like Revolut and other new digital-only banking entities that are growing very quickly, and they became the unicorn category like recently, meaning more than $1 billion valuation. And if you look at their offering, it's amazing. It's everything based on this. They are targeting specific niche segments, essentially customers. They are building machine learning and prediction models specifically based on that behavior from those customers, even with small data, with not having a ton of historical data, and tailoring the proposal to a level that is really making them win customers incredibly quickly, specifically with millennials and new customer segments. In UK, this has been crazy. Literally, there are new banks there that got the license last year, and in 1 year they came up to grab as much as 10% of the new customer acquisitions in the whole banking industry of a country.
That's incredible.
And, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean that's incredible. I was going to say, I mean, is that down to the fact that they're just sort of more convenient and they're mobile and they look nice and they smell nice and they're pretty and they're more responsive, and or is it really more fundamental than that? Is it a fundamentally new product, or is it just banking done well? Is it banking done conveniently?
That's a great question. Actually, it's a combination of both factors. So yes, there is the cool factor, which means we are really transparent. We are not going to let you down. We work with we adapt to your lifestyle. We have a mobile app and everything is done digitally. We are transparent in our processes, our commissions, whatever we do. And on top of that, their offering is unbeatable. Let me explain this because it's actually the key. So it's a combination of the way they approach the customers, how friendly they are, how transparent they are in their operations. Obviously the marketing element is very important, but even going beyond that, let me give you a concrete example of what made us really literally break the market. In the case of UK, they were able to offer not only banking services, so think credit card with certain perks and things like that, which are equivalent or similar to the existing banking proposition. But on top of that, they will say, Mr. Customer, if you sign up with me and you buy my product, which is a credit card service, I will give you shares of my company. So for a while, for a limited period, you will be paying for those services, and at the same time, with that payment, you will be getting an additional perk, which is shares of your bank. This is something the big public corporations will never do because it's nothing they can do because of their public nature and their shareholders' fiduciary responsibilities. But a private company can effectively do that, can effectively tokenize their equity and make their customers participants of the success of the bank. This is absolutely unique. And I really have a ton of respect for that idea, because it's not that I want just to be a transactional customer for a bank. I want to be more involved with my bank because effectively it's my money and it's hard to earn. So this is a killing proposition. Now just think about it for a second. It's not only that I am paying for the services of my bank, I am being a shareholder of that bank at the same time. So this is what these unicorns are doing. Are building proposals which are completely disruptive and something that the big guys cannot ever replicate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what that sort of speaks to, we talk about, giving shares in the bank to customers. It feels like that's something where you start to get into what we talk about, what we were saying there about maybe something fundamentally different, where it's actually just a different business model completely. Like it's something very, very new. And so in that sense, I wonder, Ed, what do you think about the idea of how effective it is to start something new like that compared to trying to rebuild or retool or tack on, something to which already exists? So for example, in the case of an established bank, I mean, should they try to reinvent themselves? Should they maybe just spin off and start a startup and really just try to change the face of what they do through a completely different entity? And how do you feel like what's more effective in that sort of situation? Okay,
so on the other side of this fence, if you think corporate innovation and what would be the advice for big corporations, you're absolutely right. There is no way they can, with the existing processes, even compete with the new entrants, because they cannot just match the offer, or they will need to really go down into subsidizing their offering to a point it's not profitable, just to compete or outcompete the new entrants. So the only way to mitigate that problem, because it's effectively a perfect example of a disruption that was going to happen, and we knew it was going to happen, you need to look for external models in order to provide those services to your customers. So effectively investing in those new entrants, being a shareholder, and eventually in the future buying them out of the market. Or if it is too late because they come to a point they become an IPO, just be disrupted, like it happened in many other industries. So they could spin off part of those services, but still, as long as there is a equity relationship between the parent company and the spin-off, they will run into legal problems and legal risks because effectively, when you are a public company, there are certain restrictions and regulations you need to fulfill. That's what is different. It's like two different playgrounds. Private companies can do many more things that a public company can do. So it's not an easy problem to solve, and there is also this time to market factor. And it's proven in the case of UK that probably it's too late for them to do anything because the new entrants have captured more than 10% of what the new customers in the banking industry are going to be. So it's probably too late for them. Even if they try to match the existing offering, the guys will say, I'm happy with my new bank. I'm not even willing to consider a traditional bank any longer. So I think in those cases, when you see the traction in the market like going really fast, it's too late. And the only way probably is to strategically think about buying them out. Is how much is this new entrant valued? Can I buy it, or can I liaise and collaborate with someone else to effectively get them out of the market and become something that we as a group can leverage for the future? It is in a way what has happened in other industries. You may recall what happened with Compaq in the past against IBM. So IBM was the giant in the PC industry, and they were uncontested. Compaq getting into the market with a portable PC. They grew, they disrupted the big giant, and then eventually, at the end of the cycle, they were bought by HP, and HP Compaq became a competitor to IBM. IBM left the market, the PC market, stopped manufacturing PCs. So it's an example of something that, in a similar way, may happen in the banking industry as well.
It's sort of a tough prognosis there, Ed, for the established banks, for the big companies there. That it's it's a difficult position that they're in. There is not necessarily a happy ending to that story.
No, there is not, and it's a heavy transformation process for them, but it's actually happening. You need to look for the signals actually market by market. UK is like very clear right now for all of us. Also, the regulator has been very aggressively providing banking licenses to new entrants. So it depends also on, the speed of this process depends also on how fast regulators move, and that's country-driven decisions. But for instance, UK has been really active and promoting those new entrants, and there you go. You have a big market share of the new customers going to the other side of the fence, not the traditional banks, but the new entrants. I'm expecting something similar to happen, and maybe it takes more years. I'm not saying this is going to happen overnight. Of course not. I recall that the first indications of banking disruptions are, I recall 2007, 2008, so really long ago. And we saw like the theory and how this was going to happen as long as the digital world was becoming more, driving more traction from the consumers, and consumers were transitioning into a more digital life. Now this has happened, and the consumers are already living a more compelling digital life than actually real life, and this has driven also money, banking services, and now we see that in certain countries the new entrants are really going to win. It's just a question of time. So depending on different countries, different regulations, different ways in which these new entrants are coming, the speed is different. So it still is a long process. It will still take years, or actually many years, but it's unstoppable.
Sure. So the big banks, established players can't say they didn't see it coming, and the signs were there as much as a decade ago. But Ed, I'm aware that we are strayed a little bit from our artificial intelligence initial focus, and we're also sort of running up against the clock, unfortunately. So I think just to end our discussion today, Ed, which has been a really fascinating one, I think bring it back to this question of artificial intelligence and machine learning. Perhaps if we are to look at an optimistic note, to end on an optimistic note, perhaps they, as the technologies, they do offer some hope to the big banks and other financial institutions who do want to keep up with the new entrants. And so if there are banks and financial institutions out there who want to step up their game, so to speak, with machine learning and AI, what would be your advice to them for that?
Okay, great question. You are right. We should come up. We should come back to the main topic here: how AI and machine learning, in particular, can help the banks. So, for a big corporation, a global corporation, now seeing clearly threats like new entrants by country, geographically, the best advice in the short term is to really think scale. In other words, try to leverage their scale of operations against those new entrants. So new entrants are, by definition, attacking niche segments that probably is too late for the big bank to go after. So what they can really do is to entrench themselves in the scale of their operations and really benefit from where they are strong today and make sure that this is not eaten up by new entrants in the future. That's the best short-term strategy. And for that, the machine learning or AI play is crucial because it's all about understanding better your existing customers, leveraging the data that you have about them because you know them better than anyone else. You have historical behavior from those customers, what they have been buying, you know their age, you know their income, you know many things about your customers that you can leverage in order to be better at providing your services. And this is what they are doing, by the way. They are trying to tackle that. Let me be specific. What is happening is that the management at C-level has realized the need to really optimize those scale process to be better at what they are doing today in their main segments. And for that, they have corporate-wide initiatives in order to apply or use machine learning. They call it an AI asset in a way. So it's making your company AI future-proof. And for that, there are two main initiatives they are implementing. The first one is enabling, which means more concretely education and bringing the skills in. So believe it or not, these huge corporations, they may have data analytics departments, but they are not properly linked to the business units. So what they are doing is to provide upskill their existing management team and certain business units in order to be proficient about using machine learning in order to improve the existing digital processes. So that's the first one. Like, make sure that your executives are no longer living in the past and they understand that they may be able to cluster their customers better. And there are machine learning algorithms called K-means, which is a clustering algorithm to do that, rather than just thinking the old way, which is talking to the marketing department to do the profiling for you. So now they need to really get hands-on on doing that and maybe drive machine learning-driven projects from the business unit itself. So that's one. The second one is to make sure that you have the what they call internal assets to do that. You may have the guy skilled and trained on machine learning, but if they don't have the tools or the internal resources to make that happen, that's a problem. And they already learned that this has been one of the barriers for that to get to the market quicker. So the other is what we call AI assets. Is the decision made is to make sure that you have the internal tools to do that. Those are machine learning platforms. So practical tools for non-experts or business people, business unit managers to drive their own machine learning-driven applications and projects. And by the way, there is history here. Facebook, 2016, they released publicly an announcement about FB Learner, which is their machine learning platform for internal use. And that's used by 30% of their engineering team. And non-machine learning experts, engineers that may be working on advertising, on what is the next content in your Facebook feed that you need to see, things like that, in which predictive technology is key, machine learning is key, and they need to run many different models, and for that you need tools. You need to think Oracle or think SAP, SAP, the tools that we have for the enterprise, but for machine learning. So Facebook announced that last year. Uber announced Michelangelo, same thing, an internal machine learning platform for their engineers and their business guys to implement machine learning at scale. Twitter did that already 3 years ago. Obviously, Microsoft and Google and Amazon, the big guys, have been like outspoken about this thing happening in the past, like 2-3 years ago. So now is the turn for all global major companies to do the same thing, and this is what the banks are doing, actually actively as we speak. They are looking for those tools or machine learning platforms that will enable their teams to run machine learning at scale and have hundreds, if not thousands, of use cases of predictive models and machine learning driven models in order to help them in all those business use cases that they need. Again, it's not only just what we mentioned before, clustering or building recommenders, but there is risk scoring, there is marketing attribution, how much money you spend in order to acquire a new customer based on channels. There are technically any digital process in which there is enough data is a candidate for a machine learning algorithm to improve.
Fantastic. Well, Ed, thank you so much. It's good, I think, to end on that note, a slightly more optimistic one, that the tools, the platforms, they are out there, and machine learning is a key part for big and small alike in the banking ecosystem. But that's right. I think that's what we'll have to wrap up today. Unfortunately, we're out of time. But thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your insights.
Thank you for having me.
And to our audience, we hope you've enjoyed my discussion today with Ed Fernandez on artificial intelligence in banking and finance. I'd just like to remind you that if you want to see more of our expert talks or find the recording of this talk with Ed, go to siliconvalley.center/expert talks. That's where we're going to be keeping them. And I'd like to remind you, if you want to find out more about fintech, about banking, about finance, about all the latest developments that are happening in this space, then we do Navigating FinTech Disruption Executive Immersion Program. And Ed's been a speaker on that program in the past. So I would encourage you to check that out. The next program is going to be running in April. So you still have plenty of time to find out more and to register. Again, our website, siliconvalley.center, for all the details. But on that note, I think that's where we will wrap things up. So thanks again for being with us today. We hope to see you again very soon. From me, from my guest today, Ed Fernandez, we wish you all the best. Bye-bye.